A leader has to be proactive, not reactive. Because if you're not aware of yourself emotionally, you will live disconnected. There are going to be more people who kill themselves. And it's going to be under the lie of a false assumption. That is the part for me that breaks my heart. A leader has to be dialed into themselves and aware of themselves emotionally. You have to deal with the reality. So that's why I'm so passionate about it. Hey, what's up, guys? What you're about to listen to is episode 27. When we started filming this podcast on emotional IEDs that hopefully you listened to last week, we got going. And again, we started giving out, I think, some incredible content. And so we didn't even recognize actually how long the podcast was. So we didn't want to hit you with the 8-hour podcast. And so what we did was that we broke it up into 2 parts. So what you're about to listen to is part 2 of our conversation on emotional IEDs.
And there's this grief that I have seen wash over you, and that I know washes over people in that circumstance when you love somebody and you know they're going to blow something up and you know that it's going to hurt you too. You're like, there is part of me that is telling you this because if you do this, like, it is going to hurt. It's going to hurt me too. And that can lead to like a control in the situation 100%. As well, where it's like, I'm telling you because I'm trying to control this situation and reduce the level of impact that it has. But what you're saying is that there's only so far you can go. The responsibility as a friend or as a boss, whatever your role might be, is to tell somebody what you see. And from there, you're passing the torch.
Yeah. You're right. I'll start with personal, and then I'll go into like more of like a leader role in the workplace. I think there's 2 different ways. I think one, it does hit me harder when it's personal, when you see people, because you really want them to thrive. And what can happen is that my anxiety and fear of what it could lead to will start to get me to try, like you said, to try to control the situation. And whenever you do that, that's not healthy. That's definitely not healthy. It's not a good thing, even though your intention is right. But remember, like, intention gets where only direction. And so the direction has to be, because you'll say, like, hey, it's your choice. I'm here to help. But then, like, you're trying to force it.
It's like, hey, do you remember what I told you?
Yeah. And for me, I'm a communicator. So I will say, where I get into control, I'll say something to the person, like, multiple times, because I think my voice can change them, right? Because I use my voice a lot, and a lot of times it can move people. But when I'm constantly doing that, that's me trying to, in the name of I care. When I was younger, I'm like, it's just because I care. It's like, no, I do, but I also want to control the situation too. I will say, as a boss and as a leader, whatever you're doing as a leader, you have a responsibility though, to protect those there. So I tell people, if I know someone has some big IEDs and they're not willing to be aware of that, I start very meticulously putting them in a box. To where I start removing, I tell people it's like removing living room furniture without them knowing I'm removing it. I start removing things in their life so that when they do blow up, they blow themselves up and the fallout is small. So that is where a leader has to be proactive, not reactive. That is why a leader has to be dialed into themselves and aware of themselves emotionally. Because if you're not aware of yourself emotionally, you will live disconnected. And if you are personally disconnected, you will not be connected to the workforce. You will not be connected to your direct reports. You won't be connected to the culture you're leading. And what that will ultimately lead to, there'll be people who will start blowing up the culture because you didn't see it. You weren't aware, and you weren't reactive. And if you're not healthy enough, you'll be cowardly, and you won't make those tough decisions. Because there's sometimes where people have some stuff to where you're like, okay, this blow up is like, this will like can decimate us in a major way. So if that's the case, no, I have to get rid of them. Like there's certain things where we're like, okay, we got it. Like, you can't be here. You have to go. And for others, it's like, okay, hey, I'm going to have to give them room. We'll see what happens, but I'm going to start moving. If I don't start seeing change, I'm going to slowly start removing stuff from them so that when it does happen, it's an easy all out, because again, I've tried to give them a chance. But so I think it's a difference. Even though it's hard for me, I have to think about everybody else within the organization, and I have to think about the culture and think about what we're doing beyond that one person. Though we are here we want to empower people. We want people to be launched and be the leaders they need to be as long as they're here with us. But I also have to think about all the other employees, all the other people that I'm responsible for in that process. So I think there's a difference between personal versus actually when you're actually leading within an organization.
Yeah, I think that's really good. That it names that some of the difference is that as a leader, you actually have the power to diminish what the explosion hits.
Yeah.
One of the things that we say a lot here, as of recently, I'd say within the past year or two, is see something, say something.
Yep.
Whether you are unsure, if you see it, you say it.
Yep.
And then we'll move on from there.
Yep.
And one of the things that I've noticed, and I can notice it a little bit more because I can see the ways that I do it too, is when you've grown up, and this is, I'm sharing this because it proves how much like the environments that you grow up in impact how you show up at work and how you lead other people.
Yeah.
And so when you grow up in a situation where things aren't going correctly or things are happening that are just not right.
Yep.
On maybe a smaller scale, maybe a larger scale, but things are happening that are just not right, and nobody talks about it.
Yeah.
Nobody says anything. You see it. You can recognize that it's wrong, but you're so used to nobody saying anything. And in that situation, you actually don't have the power to change it as a kid.
Yeah.
As a kid, you're not the adult in a room, and you just have to go through it, unfortunately.
Yep.
And it teaches you a lot of things about life. And one of those things is that when you see something that's wrong, maybe it's not actually wrong. And if it is actually wrong, I don't actually have the power to change it.
Yeah.
And so then whenever you're a leader in an organization and there's somebody on your team or an employee who's not doing something that's right, and that could be something like even just violating the cultural values.
Yep.
You don't feel like, maybe they're not actually doing it. Maybe let me give them the benefit of the doubt. Or for sure that it's happening and you don't say it because you're so conflict adverse.
Yeah.
And it ends up impacting an entire department and then into the entire organization.
Yep.
And then the entire organization ends up having no color to it. It's so flat.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have no values. You have no standard.
Yep.
Because of that one person is deciding to not say anything.
No, listen, I don't even know if I can't even say it any better. I think you like nailed it. That's that is what happens, is that we have to get to a place within organizations and leadership to do the internal stuff. Like the lie, and I say it over and I'll keep preaching it over on this podcast, almost any environment I'm in, that thing of, man, your personal life and your work life, and you got your personal life, you got a professional life. I'm like, that separation, I get why people say it, but it's not true, because stuff doesn't, like, emotional stuff doesn't have like a wall. Like, are you trying to tell me that if your child is sick, facing a big illness, that you're going to go to work and you saying, hey, while I'm at work, I'm not going to let this affect me. I'm not going to think about this. Absolutely. No. Because what if your spouse calls you and you're like, hey, she's not doing great today. Her medication did this. So I've been with her all day. Like, and the anxiety of your spouse and the pressure she's feeling. And then she's calling you at work. Like, you think that, my point of why I say all that is like, it's not going to just stay there. And so I say that to say, back to your point, Bree, is even our family of origin stuff, that stuff affects your leadership and it impacts cultures. A lot of the organizations and things that we work with, we start to see that. And then when you start to talk to people leading and you start to hear their stories, you start to hear I can tell a lot about somebody's leadership. I let them just start talking to me about their family, not even their family, like their current family, if they're married, okay, or if they're in a relationship. Talk to me about that. Dude, they'll tell me everything I need to know about how they're going to lead their team, because you start to just watch the dynamics in general, right? And I think it does impact people, and it begins to dilute your culture. But I also think what you're saying is that everyone, if you're in a healthy organization, why we say that here, you see something, say something, is because everyone's responsible for the culture. Mm-hmm. Everyone's responsible to keep the culture. The culture is the oxygen we breathe. And so when we see people violate the culture, we say something. Like, let me tell you this. If all of a sudden, if we're all walking down the street, and this is a very extreme case, so please hear me in this. But if all of a sudden, if we're all walking down the street and we see an older lady being beaten by somebody, like, we're not just be like, hey, well, I don't know what the old lady said. You know what I'm saying? That's on her. Like, you know what I'm saying? She must have said something crazy. Like, no, like, you're gonna hopefully go over there and help stop it, or at least call the authorities to say, hey, this is wrong. This is what's going on. Because why? We're seeing something. We're seeing someone who's vulnerable being violated, and that's not okay. Well, when I use that as an extreme case, but when you're in your organization and you're seeing something that's being violated, that is a huge part of that, you have to say something. Or if you see somebody doing things that's not helpful for them and or the organization, you have to say something. Why? Because in the end, that's going to be harmful for them and everyone else. Because if all of a sudden we saw somebody walk in and they had like some, kind of all of a sudden somebody walks in with a bag and you're like, yo, this person look, and then you see like a little timer in the bag and it's heavy and this person walks out real fast, we're not all gonna be like, oh, I wonder what's there. Hey, no, we're everybody's like, yo, it's good. Let's get everybody out of here. Let's go deal with it. But it's the same thing. When you let people's emotional IEDs run rampant in your organization, you're just putting bombs in there. You're letting those bombs stay in the organization and eventually going to blow up. That can really harm the organization.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you said those examples are extreme, but in some ways I think that they're great examples but let's actually play that out.
Yeah.
Because there are, even in those situations, I could say, a ton of people that might, let's use, somebody beating up an old lady on the side of the street. Yep. I know people who would run up and fight that person.
Yep.
I know people who would be like, are my eyes deceiving me?
Yep.
No way this is real.
Yep.
I'm going to keep walking.
Yep.
I know that. And then also people who the stress of that situation causes them to freeze up.
Yep.
And a lot of us always have that talk, like, if I saw this, or if this thing happened, like, this is what I'm going to do. But when you're in situations of high stress, we all have that fight, flight, freeze reaction.
Absolutely.
And situations that are high stress, even in work, take us back to familiar situations of high stress in our childhood. And we literally just respond the same way that we only knew how to whenever we were a kid.
Yeah.
And then we wonder why we have so many, adults in the workforce that actually act like they're 12.
That's a great point. It is. It's because you don't deal with the emotional reaction. And I think, again, while we're calling this, I have a story to tell. You got to know your story. You have to know, like, this idea of where we're at right now, but also these things with the IEDs, like where you come from, all of that matters, because if you don't get this, it will affect your leadership. Like, I can't tell you how my leadership was affected because of stuff that I just was not aware of. I was not aware of, like, man, still driving something, driving at such a hard rate, from trying to, my high school basketball coach in the 9th grade who said something out of pocket. And like he said, to motivate me, I've talked about it before, but then it was like still pushing me. And, and everybody would say, well, you need to put a chip on your shoulder. It'd help you be good. But I'm like, yeah, but it made me also never be satisfied and to be chasing a ghost. Well, what does that mean? That then causes me to drive people who work with me sometimes to a place, because in the past, to a place they didn't want to go, because of the fact that I'm being driven by this ghost I'm still chasing on my high school. Like, that is affecting people's lives. That's why I tell people, you think this stuff is all like, people is we're getting way too soft and we're talking about emotional health. I'm like, no, you're screwing people's lives up because you won't become aware. You won't become aware. Now you may do that in your marriage, but like, I tell people, like, how you function at home or how you function with your kids, you're going to function that way at your work. You're not that talented. No one's that talented unless you're like a sociopath, like where you literally like, you flip the script where you're like, oh, no, I'm this way here, but when I go there, I'm a completely different human. That's why the show Severance is like, it's a lot of people, it's a weird show, but it's such a brilliant concept of like, it pretty much is the concept of like, you go to work and like, you have like legit your work life, and then you have and they change your brain thing. So pretty much you go into work and and when you leave work, you don't remember, like, you don't even know you work at that place. You have no idea what went on during the day, and you have your own personal life. And then when you go into work, it's like something flips, and you don't know anything about your personal life or what's going on there. You just have your work life and your work friends. And it's like legit, and it's so brilliant how they do it because that's how we've been taught. Mm-hmm. But that's not real life. And and the show goes on, it starts to cross over. People, because it's like, it's real life. And as I'm watching this show, as weird as it's filmed brilliant, all this, I'm like, that is so interesting. We see that. And I hear people go, man, that show's wild. That show's so crazy. And I'm like, that's how most of you think. That's how most of you think you live. But you don't live that way. It's impossible to leave stuff there. Like, it's just, you can't, you're not just leaving that stuff at home, man. Like, it's just, and you got it. You're not leaving your stuff from your childhood there. I mean, how many people have we worked with, Bree, where we start unpacking stuff with them and they start telling us about their childhood, and then you start watching, I'm like, yeah, and then they start telling me, oh, like recently we were working with somebody, and you're like, yep, you grew up like this. Yep, that makes complete sense why you lead the way you lead.
Yeah, every single one of them. Yeah. And the crazy part is that at this point, we can meet somebody and guess the themes that they're probably going to tell us based off of, I literally kid you not, we could probably talk to somebody for 5 minutes and guess the way that they lead and guess the things or the themes that could have happened as they were growing up that guide them to lead that way.
100%.
And then we spent the rest of the time convincing them that that's what's happening.
That's pretty much it. It's like, yeah, this is it. We know this. Here's what that is. And I just let them, that's what I say, tell me a little bit. I was asked, like, hey, tell me a little bit about your upbringing, whatever. And they just start talking to you. You're like, yep, this is, So, like, somebody could tell me, well, I grew up and, my father's in the military. Okay. Well, then I start watching their leadership. I could probably tell how their home was by then just watching their leadership. They don't have to tell me anything else about their home. I watch their leadership, and I can pretty much tell, like, okay, because they're going to either overperform either way, and it's going to tell me, that will tell me how their childhood was. Because they grew up, either they had if they grew up with somebody, I'm using the military, this is just one, because we haven't had anybody like this, but if it was the military, somebody came to me, if it was somebody leading one direction where it's like they're like overly bop, 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 then they live in a super authoritative home. And, again, some good, some bad. If somebody is like super disconnected, kind of whatever, it's an overreaction because probably they lived in like more of an authoritative, so they're overreacting now to how they came up or whatever, or they had a father who was disconnected this way, they moved a lot of different places. I mean, I could just tell, why. I mean, people can tell from me, why can I connect with a lot of different people? My father was a coach. I literally lived in like 7 different places. So I had to learn how to connect with people. That's why I can just I can easily connect, because I had to figure out how to do that, because I was moving. I wasn't just moving down the road. I was literally moving to I went from Knoxville, Tennessee to Akron, Ohio. Those are hundreds of miles away to completely different, multiple states over to do that. So you just start to learn people that way. Yeah.
Something I would point out to you that you mentioned was how much the older generation is like, oh, you're getting soft kind of conversation. Mm-hmm. And on the other end, I'd like to point out that we also don't agree that the way culture defines self-awareness or authenticity is the right way either. We definitely do not think that it encompasses the fullness of what it is.
Matter of fact, let me tell you this. And so this will be, we'll have Grady clip this as the spicy take today. So here's the spicy take, is that I think the way this generation defines authenticity is as dangerous as boomers in their lack of defining anything. It's the same thing, because it's dangerous, because when we define authenticity as what I feel or what I want versus like, no, this is who you are by doing the hard work, and then remaining that way, you are literally giving people poison, because they're deceived. They're living lives that don't exist. And so, because it'll happen. And then when they bump up against real life, it's not adding up. It's not adding up, because you have to deal with reality. I don't care. Reality won't change. Those things, like our world, we think we can manipulate reality, and you can't. You can't manipulate like real life. And what I mean by manipulate real life is I'm talking about, if you are not talented enough, you're not going to be able to play you're not going to be able to play in the NBA. Like, I don't care how much you hope for it. You're 4'4". Like, you can't play in the NBA. You know what I'm saying? Just like this. I would not be, in my height of whatever, would have been a great cheerleader, right, Bree? Like, I wouldn't have been like this man, you know, put me at, you know, the top of the pyramid, throw me up, flip me around, whatever, right? Like, no, like, it makes zero sense. I don't care what I want. It's just not, it's reality, it's something different. And I think it's super dangerous today that we are allowing people to live deceived lives. That is why I'm very passionate about it. I don't mean to be mean, but I'm so I see the dangers of people and some of the mental health stuff we're dealing with. I think some of it's very much so. There's clinical things and all that. So hear me in this. But I think some of it it's the disappointment because you thought you were one thing and you're not that. Mm-hmm. And so now you're disappointed. Now you're turned upside down. And you're sad, you're depressed, and again, it's real feelings, but those real feelings were based off a false assumption that you were this and you should get this. Not true. Like, it was a false. Listen, when I was aware enough to know, when I was sitting there like working Michael Jordan's camp, and I got to watch him with my own eyes, I'm like, yeah, it's a false assumption. Everything I'm gonna be that good. And if I kept thinking, man, one day I'm going to be 6-time NBA champion and one of the world's greatest players, I realized in that moment, as hard as I worked and as good as I was in basketball, I was never going to be that good. It would have been crazy for me to do that. And then I would have spent the rest of my life chasing something I never would have become. And I think that, you know what, I was very thankful that I was like, that God had given me some awareness to realize that. But how many people do that all the time? How many people are out there like, that like are in jobs or skill sets that they're not like great at, but they expect that they're going to be the CEO of their company. They don't work at it. They don't even have the skill set to do that. Everybody thinks they're going to be Elon Musk. Really? Like, go listen to Walter Isaacson and read his new book. You want that life? Do you? Because, like, listen, a lot of people talk about they want that Elon life, working 9 to 5. Good luck. You want Elon bread? You better work than them Elon hours then. And on top of that, you better be one of the best inventors and thinkers of all time. It's stupid. But here's the point. Everybody has to be okay. It's coming to a realization of who you are. I think it's super dangerous. We don't have to find out. Anyway, that's a super old man rant on my high horse, my soapbox right now. Because it really does bother me because I'm watching people be really harmed. Mm-hmm. And it's going to get worse. I think this is the thing why it makes me sad. There are going to be more people who kill themselves. And it's going to be under the lie, the disappointment and the depression of a false assumption. They thought they should be here, and they're going to be disappointed with their life. And it was never the life meant for them. That is the part for me that breaks my heart. There are going to be more people who do that. And it was never meant for them. And I'm not talking, again, hear me when I say this. I'm not talking about people who commit suicide. I mean, there's real clinical issues that are there. So hear me in this. But I'm saying there are people where I think it's already happened and it's going to continue to happen, where people have hit sadness and depression based off a false assumption of where they should be versus actually where they're supposed to be and who they actually are. So that's why I'm so passionate about it.
Mm-hmm. And I think that we are really passionate about helping people have the tools and the appropriate tools in order to navigate those things, no matter the depth of which they experience them. Even if it is something clinical, I think that our practices are something that we do genuinely believe will give you tools to help you navigate the ditch. And hopefully provide some hope in the process. And one of the ways, which we haven't gotten to this yet, but I think we can get into it next, is how you actually begin to disarm a bomb, disarm the emotional IEDs. And I think that's something, how you do that is through trigger, feeling, meaning, which I'll explain in a second. But to the observation of how culture currently defines everything, I think that one of the things that culture, and that's a very broad statement, is fairly well at, is especially my age, Gen Z, they're really good at naming the feeling. Like I feel a lot of pain. I feel really sad. I'm feeling ashamed. I'm feeling all these things. But that's as far as the extent of the tool that they have,
Yep.
which is definitely one step or two steps closer than the older generation in the sense of
100%.
like, I'm aware that I have emotions.
Yep.
I'm aware that they impact me and the people around me. And I can say, for the most part, what emotion is kind of dictating my life right now.
Yep.
But it stops there. And I think that people then begin to say, how can I minimize this emotion? And how can I create a world around me of friends and work and just life to help minimize the pain of the negative emotions that I'm feeling?
Yeah.
Because the thing is that the negative emotions are always the most like, they're the most primary.
Yep.
They're the things that you feel the most and you feel them the deepest,
Yep.
unfortunately. And so I think that it's just trying to minimize what those feelings are rather than going through the entire process of what is causing this feeling.
Yep.
What is the feeling and why does it exist? Because once you can name why it actually exists,
Yep.
then you have a grid to navigate your life through on what tells you what is why am I feeling this way because of something that's impacted me in the past, or am I feeling this way because of something that's happening right now that needs to impact the way that I navigate my life, aka does somebody need to not be a part of your life?
Yeah.
Do I need to change jobs? Like all of those critical questions, you can't actually critically think about them when you don't know why you're feeling the way that you're feeling and what that might actually be coming from.
100%. And I think that when you get to it, sometimes even where I think your generation, when it comes to like the initial feeling of it, where sometimes my challenges with people is that sometimes if you're finding that feeling right from the beginning, it's usually a sign that's not the real feeling, because it can be shown as like sadness, but when you start to do the work, you start to really realize like you're actually angry. I was dealing with something, and what I realized was that I was like, man, I felt sad. But when I started to unpack it more, I was like, no. My real feeling, actually, what's undergirding that sadness is actually anger. I'm really angry. And then you start to realize, because now if you think you're sad, that's a whole different way you start to detect versus, oh, I'm angry. There's a whole different other way. And so I think it's really important to make sure that, as we talk about these tools that we do, that some of these tools will even get you to a deeper level of like actual feelings. I think one of the things that you do a great job of is that you've done the work, and so you actually start to understand pretty quick what the deep level feeling. I actually think you give your generation way too much credit, because I think a lot of the feelings they feeling like they're just top level feelings. I don't think it's actually the real way they feel.
I think that's fair.
I think they just know how to do it. But again, let me tell you that is a positive step though, versus like my generation above, just like, where are you talking about feelings? I don't feel anything. You suck it up. You're like, cool, got it there, Rick. We'll just keep on moving. We'll keep on moving forward and just keep being just horrible, and people just dying at like these ages because they've never dealt with like their real stresses and things like that. It's bananas. But anyway, I think it's a good thing for your generation. Yeah. Well, sweet. Well, here's the thing. This idea, though, as we come to a close, we don't want to leave people. We've given you, I think we've given a lot of gold today. But Bree, really quick, we talked about trigger, feeling, meaning, right? The idea of disarming. One of the ways that we disarm is trigger, feeling, and meaning, right? And so, again, I'll do my best. I'll let you add a little bit more to it. I know you talked a little bit about it a second ago, but it's really important for everybody. One of the greatest ways you disarm IEDs is this idea. Like an IED, there was a trigger. There's something that would have to spark that when an IED went off, there's something that sparked it. You got to figure out what's that trigger. What is the thing that made you feel the way you felt, right? I tell people, I always give the example of like, death by 1,000. It's like not even about death by 1,000. I call it death by 1,000 razor blade cuts, right? Small ones. It's the fact of in the morning, you opened up, I kind of give people an example. You posted that perfect Instagram pic you thought. You changed it 40 times. Filters there. You thought the angle was perfect. Caption, I mean, you're deep in your bag, you know what I'm saying? You pull out like a Drake, you know what I'm saying? You got the unreleased for Drake. All, yeah, I know you got the unreleased for for all the dogs, and you got some lyrics nobody has. So you got the Drake lyric under the caption, and nobody even knows yet, or Chat GPT gave you one, so you're like, yo, this is it. You go to sleep, you're thinking, I'm going to wake up, 2,000 likes, man, I'm going to get, all of a sudden, and I'm going to have, I don't know, Fashion Nova hit me up. I'm going to have Fashion Nova hit me up. I'm going to be a brand ambassador, whatever. You wake up, you got 1 like, and it's from your mom, all right? So you wake up, your mom likes your pic, you're like, all right, and you feel some type of way. What we will do in that moment, it's like, that's a trick, because you start to feel some type of way. But then what you'll do is just keep going throughout your day. And it's just like, and you'll have something else happen, something else. And then finally, there's like small little razor blade cuts. And next thing that thing becomes this gaping wound. And it's the last little one that causes it to bleed everywhere. And it's because your roommate didn't wash the dishes and you spaz on your roommate and lose your mind and just go whatever. Well, here's the point of why I say that. The trigger was early in the morning when that Instagram picture, when you woke up and you had 1 like. That's what triggered everything and set everything to start to go. The question you got to start asking, then it's like, okay, but what is that meaning? Why that trigger? And what's the feeling? What feeling did you have right there? And your first feeling is usually not the real feeling. You got to go a little bit deeper. Was that feeling like, man, is that first feeling, man, I'm pissed off? Why are you pissed off about that? Like, what made you just so, whatever. It's usually not the right. Then you go, okay, but why am I pissed off? And then you go a little bit deeper. Then finally, as you start to get to the real feeling, then you can get to the meaning. Because maybe what you feel like that meaning is, you'll say, man, it's because, listen, people don't like me, Instagram, the algorithm was hating on me, you know what I'm saying? They see me trying to shine, so the algorithm blocked me. But no, when you really get down to it, you may get to the issue of, man, the meaning was this. I worked really hard to do this. I grew up a certain way. Man, I finally feel like I've been working hard, getting myself in shape, doing all this, and still nobody likes me. So the meaning is that I'm not accepted, I'm not liked. But the way you will play that it all was triggered by this beginning thing. And so that's a very practical example. And again, I use something as crazy as the Instagram photo, but that's how that works. I don't know if you want to add anything else, Brie.
Yeah, I think I can add, because I think this would be something probably good to put on the screen, because it's a super practical takeaway. Yep. This is even something that we give to our clients all the time.
Yep.
So how we define trigger is an event, situation, comment, or just a happening that caused you to feel a negative emotion.
Yep.
And so it's usually internal or external. So it can be actually something that happened to you, or it can be a thought that you have about yourself, randomly throughout the day, or a behavior that you did.
Yep.
And it's usually described in a sentence or two.
Okay.
So for feelings provide information, and they're usually described by a word or two from the following. And then I can get a little bit more complex with the emotions too. So anger, which is wrong done to you. Nobody liked my Instagram post. I'm mad. They did wrong by me by not liking my Instagram post.
Yep.
Guilt is a wrong done by you. So did something wrong. I messed up. Yep. Shame is I am bad. So which is it's very interesting, because guilt is I did something bad to you.
Yep.
Shame is a belief that I am inherently bad and there's just something wrong with me and that can't be fixed. Sadness is a felt loss, grief, and then fear/anxiety is a perceived threat. But whenever you think about it, so taking the analogy or the situation that you did as an example, when somebody doesn't, they wake up, they say like, oh, I'm pissed off. It's like, well, pissed off, that's not an emotion. What are you feeling right now?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I'm angry. Are you frustrated? Or are you, what's a bigger word for angry? Are you enraged?
Yep.
Like there are little ways that you can start to actually name how small or how big is this feeling that I'm feeling based off the situation that happened. And then the meaning is, why are these feelings that I'm having, why are they actually connected to that trigger?
Yep.
Because some people might have, not a lot of people like their Instagram post, and they might feel sad.
Yep.
Or they might feel ashamed.
Yep.
Or they might start to feel afraid or anxious. And those would all make sense based off things that might have happened in their story before. The biggest thing whenever it comes to the meaning that we talk about all the time is just being curious and compassionate.
Yep.
That's the point in time where people usually start to feel ashamed. They start to feel like, oh man, I'm starting to realize like what I'm doing wrong here because of that. I'm bad.
Yep.
And then once you do that, you're halting yourself. It's really hard for you to continue to move forward when you're not open to the answers that you're actually trying to look for.
For sure. Yeah, and I think that we're going to have that up. And what I probably like to do is let's put it like, let's even that little description in like our notes. For those who aren't like watching, they're listening to it, we'll have it like in the show notes, just kind of like a little definition of all that stuff. Why that's important is because, again, this is a really simple thing, trigger, feeling, meaning, to be able to help you walk through your process, because you got to have we like to try to give people real-time in action things to do. I am rewatching Band of Brothers, which came out again. I'm kind of on my I guess today my whole like war type of kick, because this is about World War II. But the one thing that they had to be able to do is like they had to be able to like sometimes like have basic medical. The ability to do some medical treatment on people if you were just just a soldier, because you were dealing with people, man. Sometimes, all of a sudden they get shot, they have, stab wound, whatever. They had to be able to like help treat them. There wasn't a medic there all the time. So I had to put, do this, put this there. What we're trying to do is get people like you're in real life action every day. We want to be able to give you some tools or a tool that can help you in real life every day. And so I encourage you, as you're listening to this, like the next time you feel some type of way, that's all I'm going to say, you feel some type of way, you're like, ooh, then just try to go through trigger, feeling, meaning. The more you can practice this, the more you can do it, the more to help you. What this does, it helps you find. That's like I said, there was that fuse. There was that when they would do the IEDs, they would find the line. Okay, whoa, where's this coming from? Where's the trigger at? What was it? You had to go find it. And so this will be able to help lead you down the road to find some of those IEDs underneath and actually help you unarm those things, to defuse those bombs. And so make sure you're doing it, because, again, this affects your leadership, as we need more authentic leaders into the world. Well, hey, I hope today was helpful for you all. Make sure you let us know. Make sure you have any questions, anything. You hit us up on our Instagram. You can hit us up on TikTok. You can DM us. We would love to answer whatever questions you may have. And until next time, keep writing the rules.